Hello, 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 and welcome to 52 Weeks of Flow, the podcast that delves into the depth of human potential and the transformative power of flow. On this show, we talk about peak performance, flow, energy, and bridge the gap between science and woo-woo. Through authentic stories and real-life examples, my guests and I will help you dive into your superpowers and create your next level of success. My name is Bea Marie Neen, neuroscience geek, flow enthusiast, and your guide to rewilding yourself. I'm on a mission to raise the frequency of the planet by supporting you to untame yourself and step into your flow. Hello, 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 and welcome to 52 Weeks of Flow, the podcast that delves into the depths of human potential and the transformative power of flow. I'm so happy that you are here on our season 2, and this is going to be a really, really exciting season because I have so many amazing guests already lined up due to your beautiful recommendations and your support. So thank you so much. My guest today is an entrepreneur, a radio host, and a country music singer. And she is the driving force behind the Female Creative and empowering community for creative businesses. With 9+ years of business success and 20 years in learning and development, Hannah Roper offers valuable guidance to women navigating business. Hannah has embarked on a transformative journey, balancing business and corporate careers, embodying strategic thinking and work-life balance, shining a light for women in business. And we have already chatted a little bit before we hit record, and this has been already such a delight. So welcome back to the room. Hi, Hannah.
Hello.
All right. You just shared with us that your radio show has been nominated for a British Country Music Award.
Yes, it has. It's been an amazing end to the year. Apologies, the bin men have just arrived and my dog has decided that he wants to shout at them, if you can now hear that in the background, of all of the times. But this is real life and this is what it's like being an entrepreneur working from home, for sure. But yes, an amazing end to the year. I've been doing the radio show since May, so I've just hit my 30th show. And I'm so excited that it's been nominated for an award, which is something that I never ever thought would happen in my first 12 months, for sure.
This is really, really incredible. And you just touched on, an entrepreneur working from home. You're also a mom. So it's kind of, doing business, balancing everything. So how do you do that? How is that keeping the balance?
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? How do we all keep the balance? I think for me, a lot of it is around prioritization. I have to be really, really careful and quite strict with myself around what I'm prioritizing at what time. There are certain seasons where my business has to take over. I also run a country music festival that happens every April. So, from December through to April, my priority has to be around that. But then there are certain times of the year, like the summer holidays, the children have to then come first. So I've definitely learnt the art of prioritization, but also the art of self-forgiveness, because in the early days, I would beat myself up so much around, not being able to keep every plate juggling, not being able to, focus in every single area at the same time. And I just have really negative self-talk. And I learned very, very quickly that was actually having a detrimental effect to me being able to run my business, be able to be a mum, be able to do the passion projects that I have, and just, be able to be who I wanted to be. So I really started being much kinder to myself, just having that inner dialogue that said it's okay to put that down at that particular point, or I'm going to have to step away from that at that particular point. And also I learned to celebrate my wins. It doesn't matter how small, even if it's just getting the laundry on that particular day, it is about celebrating those wins and just being much more positive about myself and about having that juggle, and that it's okay that sometimes my attention has to go to different places.
That is this is incredible that you found that grace, that place of grace within yourself. Because I think most of us, if we found a balance, even if, we found our, daily flow, I think sometimes it's a very fragile balance that when something comes in, like your dog right now, you seem so calm. You seem so calm with this. But if my kids would like run in right here, right now, I would probably just like,
oh, don't get me wrong. There is a part of that. But do you remember during the lockdowns when, of course, people were having to do so many things from home, and there were lots of politicians and media professionals, and they were having to do all of their interviews from home. And I don't know if you saw it, but there was one particular man, and I can't remember who he was, but he was doing a really, really serious interview, and his toddler ran in. And that to me, I was like, this is changing the world, because for so long there has been so much pressure, and I think especially on women, to demonstrate that they have it all together. And I, by all means, do not have it all together. I think I've learned tools, I've learned strategies, I've learned the art of self-forgiveness. I've learned that I can, even when things go wrong, that actually it's okay to still carry on and to still I can still be a professional. I can still be good at what I do. I can still be a good mum. I can still represent myself in the way that I want to represent myself, even though my world is surrounded by chaos. As it so often is. And part of this journey for me is I was diagnosed with ADHD in the summer of 2023. And that for me was a huge light bulb moment. It suddenly made sense as to why I could juggle so many things. It made sense as to why I was comfortable in chaos, and why things that maybe would bother other people, like my husband, for example, don't bother me in the same way. And I think that has really contributed to me having that attitude of, this is me, this is life, this is, and this is okay. And I think that's where maybe the perception of me, being calm and just kind of getting on with things, it's because I've made peace with that chaos. And I think being a mum, being an entrepreneur, having passion projects, that's a lot. And one thing that we haven't mentioned, I actually still hold down a corporate job as well.
Oh,
just
okay.
Just to add that in, because I love my corporate job. I work in the aviation industry. It fascinates me because it's not something that I'd ever done before. The most I knew about airplanes was getting on one to go on holiday. And now I see the other side of it, and I see the intricacies of the aviation industry and the kind of supplier-customer relationship. And also, it's still a very male-dominated industry. And I'm not willing to give up my journey of being in a position of leadership as a woman in a very male-dominated industry. So I balance that alongside running my business, running a country music festival, and being a radio host and a mum, and having a rescue dog that is a bit unpredictable.
That is so amazing. Can we come back to your ADHD diagnosis?
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, I think this is like a really devastating diagnosis.
Mm,
How
yeah.
was that for you?
It was it was a real mixed bag of emotions. It was something that when I was researching, it was mentioned to me, and I was in a very privileged position. I was able to get my diagnosis privately, which meant I got it a lot quicker. On the NHS in the UK, you're looking on an average of 2 to 3 years to even start the process. So I was very privileged to be able to go privately. As I started to do the initial tests, have the initial interviews, things started to slot into place. And I remember you kind of go through some online tests, some written tests. Your parents are asked to do a questionnaire. Your partner, if you have one, is asked to do a questionnaire. My husband did the questionnaire independently. I didn't wasn't anywhere near him. I said, I just need you to do this. I don't want to be influencing you in any way. Please just do this questionnaire and let me know what you think. And he did it, and he came he came in from the kitchen and went, that just described you. Every question I had to answer, and it was kind of sometimes do this, and occasionally do this, and always do this, never do this, that sort of question. And he said every question was you. You do that all the time. And it was interesting because my parents' results were a bit different. They had recognized some of the characteristics, but not to the same extent that my husband saw them on a daily basis. And this is something for especially women that are being diagnosed with ADHD later in life. You very, very quickly as a child, and I grew up in, the 80s and the early 90s, you were at school, you could not step out of line. As a young girl, ADHD wasn't even considered that young girls would have ADHD. You were described as being too talkative, or away with the fairies, or a daydreamer, or slightly challenging. But ADHD was never something that was associated. And I learned very quickly to mask. And I think that's then what my parents then saw as a child, that I was masking, and they didn't realize that was going on underneath. I never felt like I belonged as a child, as a teen, as an adult. Never felt like I belonged. I was always on the periphery of friendships. I never had a best friend. I never had somebody that I trusted fully in that sort of relationship. Interestingly, now my best friend, who I met during COVID, actually online, she lives locally to me, almost like online dating, but for friends. And she also has ADHD, and we just understand each other. We absolutely understand each other. When neither of us will message for a week, and then one of us suddenly goes, "Oh gosh, I better send a message. I haven't checked in." There's no stress. There's no worry. There's no reading into things. It's just we both know why the other person behaves in a particular way. And that's the first proper friendship, really deep friendship that I think I've ever had. And a lot of that comes with the diagnosis of finally understanding why you behave in a certain way, why you think in a certain way. And I remember going through the interviews, had quite extensive interviews with a clinical psychologist. And she was asking me questions like, did you do this or did you do that? Did you do that as a child? Did you do that as an adult? And multiple times I said to her, "Oh, yeah, I do that. Doesn't everybody do that?" And she would just look at me, and then that would be that moment of realization of, oh no, not everybody does think like that. And for me, it's really helped my communication. I always thought I was a really good communicator anyway, and to some extent I am. But now I really understand that my brain is programmed in a slightly different way, and I think about things in a slightly different way, and that's okay. And that's where some people talk about almost going through a bit of a grieving process, almost looking at what life might have been like if they had been diagnosed earlier, and almost the the anxiety that might have been relieved, the stress that might have been relieved had they have been diagnosed earlier. And I didn't really have that because you can't change the past. I can't go back. I can't make my teachers realize that I'm different. I can't make my, the managers or the employers, or I can't make any of them see me any differently because life has moved on. So I almost felt quite celebrating, celebratory, whatever the word is. I felt like celebrating because my brain finally made sense to me. And that's really, really helped me form better relationships. It's helped me just not change myself, but put boundaries in place and protect myself. Just to be able to celebrate the fact that I can do all these things and that my brain does work slightly differently. And sometimes I'm going to come across people whose brains do work similarly to me, and that's amazing. And more often than not, I'm going to come across people whose brains don't work the same as me. And that's okay as well, because we can find a common ground. And like I say, it just helps me form those relationships better. So it's been a really interesting journey. And I know a lot of women are going through it because so many women are realizing that this is something that is worth looking into, and especially perimenopausal, when you have hormone changes, or if you go through an incredibly stressful time in life, which for me, it was a very, very stressful house move. We ended up having to live in a hotel as a family of 4 for a month, which is not as glamorous as it sounds in any way, shape or form. And all of that meant that my coping mechanisms and my masking slipped because of the level of stress that I was under. And that's what led me to the diagnosis. So I think for anyone that is thinking that they might have ADHD tendencies, or it feels like it fits, explore it. Even if you don't go down the route formally, there's so much information out there that when you know, you know.
This is so fascinating because as you're talking, I'm like, my brain works slightly different. People tell me that I am not normal. But for me, really, I think that ADHD is a superpower. Yeah. I don't see anything wrong with ADHD. In my kids' school, there are a lot of diagnosed kids, and the school is very, very great. They get like a personal support person, a supporter with them in school. So to handle their emotions better, it depends on, what kind of ADHD you basically have. If you have impulse control losses or whatever. But so the school is really, really amazing with it. But still, it is looked at as a sickness, like an illness, like a diagnosis, instead of it is just something different. Yes. Our brain is like an unexplored continent with vast possibilities and with so much treasure in it. Yeah. And just because we don't know it yet, or just because it's not normal, we consider it as something that is not right. Yeah. But if you look at people with ADHD, you have immense possibilities. Yeah. There is so much more that you are capable of doing, of seeing, of grasping than people who are just in this one lane thing. Yeah. Yeah. And yes, of course, that also brings challenges, with not being able to handle stress as much as a person that is only focused on one thing. But, with everything, if you have a physical disability, or if you have anything, if you have short hair, if you have long hair, with everything comes a downside.
Yes, yes, that's so true. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it. And I think that's where I didn't necessarily go through that grieving process with my diagnosis because it gave me a reason as to why I do and can do the things I do. Sorry, he now wants to go outside. Now he's just sitting at the door and just staring at it as well. Honestly, get a dog, they said. It'll be fun, they said. And I think because I was so often, my friends will joke that I was made in a lab. So when I host a networking event every quarter for women in my local area who are creative business owners. And the whole point is just getting together just to share experiences, share the highs and lows of running a business. And I will always introduce myself because we often have new attendees that don't really know me, don't really know who I am and what I do. And my friends joke, they say, oh, she was made in a lab because I do all these different things. And I used to take that not offensively, but I used to think, gosh, if only people saw what was underneath the surface, if only people saw the emotional dysregulation, if only people saw the pain that I feel because I feel things so deeply. So one of the ways that an ADHD brain works is that you are almost overly empathetic. You feel things so deeply. So I would get involved in a TV series and I would feel every emotion that the characters are going through. I can't watch the news because I feel every emotion that is going on in that particular news report. My husband always tells me that I'm too soft and too nice because I will always feel the negative emotions that somebody else is going through. And as a result, I don't necessarily see their flaws or their negative points because in my brain, it's like, but they're still a human being and they still feel this and they still might feel upset and they still might feel, judged or whatever it might be. And I feel those things so deeply that almost my body physically can react to those things sometimes. And that's all because of the ADHD. However, the plus side is I can juggle multiple passion projects. I have learnt to run a business alongside working full-time in a corporate industry. I have learnt that I can organise. I'm also called Monica from Friends. My friends always say that I'm just the Monica of the group because of what I've experienced, because of the way that my brain works. I have two modes. I have the mode which is I have not a clue what's going on. I don't know what my name is. I don't know what day of the week it is. And I've got no idea what I was just doing or where I just put the thing that was in my hand. Or I've got a clipboard, a spreadsheet, and I have organised everything down to the second. And these are my two modes. So, of course, publicly, people see the Monica side of me. They don't see the Phoebe side of me. and that's where, again, that ADHD is a superpower because I can deploy the Monica side of me and have everything in my life organized because that's what reduces my anxiety. That's what reduces my stress. That's what allows me to do all the things that I want to do. And having an ADHD brain means I can't just work in the corporate world. I can't just settle for the status quo. I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to help that person and I can see a problem over there and I have to go and help that person solve it. And I think that's why I connect with probably people like yourself, people that we've met through the Women Thrive Summit because we're all creative. Our brains all work in a slightly different way. Quite a few of us have recently had an adult ADHD diagnosis, and those that haven't actually connect with a lot of the ways an ADHD brain works.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I cannot watch the news. I cannot watch scary or very, very intense movies at night because then I cannot sleep.
Yeah, because you get
and when you were just describing that, my daughter, when she watches a movie, she just zooms completely in. You can talk to her, but she will not hear.
Yeah, like hyper focus.
Yeah. And for me, the same. It was always like my mom always tells me, when you were little, you were the same.
Yeah. And it's hereditary. ADHD is passed down in some way through a family. And again, for my parents, there is a high likelihood that my mum has ADHD, and my dad also displays ADHD tendencies. And probably if you then trace it back, one of their parents would have had ADHD tendencies, and you can then track it back. And it's really interesting when you start to read about it, research it, the clinical aspect, but also the lived in. What does that really mean? What does the science really mean when you transfer that to everyday life? And then that bulb goes off.
I want to explore a thought with you. Okay. Because for the past 200 years, we have been made the same. Through school system, through whatever. So just to keep us in boxes, to keep us working, to keep us focused.
And controlled.
Yes, exactly. What if ADHD is actually our normal state, but that has been suppressed by this outer construct? And when you do not fit into this outer construct, you fall out of society, you fall out of love, you fall out of security and safety.
Yeah.
So we all comply.
Yeah.
And mask like you did when you were a child, or what a lot of children did in school. Because I don't remember in school, back in the days then, that ADHD was even a thing.
I only remember it in terms of what they would call, I don't know if it was the same for you, but in the UK, they call it naughty boy syndrome.
Yeah.
And traditionally, then it would be young boys who could not sit still, who were quite disruptive, quite naughty. And when society moves on, and we're not there yet, but we have absolutely moved on from the 80s, the 90s, even the 2000s, when it comes to understanding that people are neurodiverse. And when you kind of look back, and it's because as an ADHD brain, you are very all or nothing. And I'm absolutely all or nothing. I am hyper focused, or I'm in my own world. And my husband can be talking to me and I'm hearing him. I'm not recognizing the words. He will get very frustrated with me. And again, the diagnosis has enabled us to communicate about that better. And now I can be really honest and say to people, really sorry, totally tuned out just then. Could you reverse that, and could you tell me again? And I will focus on you and I will listen this time.
I just have to laugh because I also do that. I sometimes look at people and I say, okay, I see that your lips are moving, but I have not heard a thing that you said. Can you please repeat that?
And that's it. But for so long, I would pretend that I was listening, and due to embarrassment and self-consciousness and my anxiety, I would then try and fill in the gaps. And I would then try and look for clues. And as an ADHDer, you become very, very attuned to people's body language, very attuned to the slightest change in body language. And an ADHDer will read into that, because that is part of their decoding, because they can't just rely on the verbal that's coming out of somebody's mouth. You have to rely on what's going on around you, the body language, the facial expressions, the hand gestures, and everything like that. And you become very, very attuned to even the slightest change, which my husband won't notice in somebody. But we'll be having a conversation, we'll walk away, and I'll say, did you just see that change in body language? Did you just see that person, suddenly they didn't like what we were saying, or they lost interest in what we were saying, or you could tell that they wanted to move on? And my husband's like, what are you talking about? Everything was fine. And I think we have learnt to mask, especially as women. I think there is definitely a cultural aspect. I think there are more people with ADHD than we know about, for sure. Whether that then was almost our original state and we have been evolved out of that because of societal norms, because of the restrictions, constrictions, and everything like that. It's an interesting theory.
Yeah, and when you were talking, it just made sense to me, because that we have been conditioned to so many things that all of a sudden turn out that this is not our natural state.
Yeah.
The other day, I just read about a new discovery that, I don't know, about 8 years ago or something, they discovered a tomb from a Viking.
Okay.
And they said, oh my God, this must have been this huge warrior because he was buried with this beautiful shield and the sword and so many, artifacts and stuff. Like the people have loved him. Like he was really rich. He was really powerful and stuff.
Yeah.
And years later, they did a DNA analysis and it turns out it's a woman.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. The shield maidens and everything. So it's not just, fairy tales and everything.
Yeah.
And the other day I read about a discovery that what are they called? Neanderthals? No,
almost like the cave.
Yeah, cavemen.
Yeah.
Back then it was said men were hunting, women were gathering. That's the thing. That's basically what our culture is built of. Men go work, women stay home.
Yeah.
They found a lot of evidence, when they found female gravesites, and there were weapons in that grave, they always said it's, their husbands, or, something like they gave them weapons for their ongoing journey or whatever they believed or something like that.
Yeah.
But they never considered that it could have been hers.
Yeah. They were their weapons. Yeah.
Their weapons, because now they looked into it more, but they discovered that the female bodies were showing the same hunting injuries as the male bodies did. And they also figured out that the female body structure was was actually better for long-term hunting than the male body, because the males were really, like, they were good for sprinting, for quick action, but the leaner women, they were able to hunt longer periods of times.
Wow.
So they were actually more successful in hunting herds because they were constantly moving.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So the whole his story needs to be rewritten.
Yeah.
And that's why this thought of maybe ADHD isn't something new or a disorder. Maybe this is our natural state. And we're just being put in a box, confined, whatever it is, to be able to measure better. Like in school, grades. Grades don't make sense.
Yeah.
Because they don't tell you how good a child is in reading. It just tells them, right now you're not good enough. Yeah. But it doesn't say you cannot read, or what's some kids take longer, some brains have grades don't make sense.
And that's I think where, because I used to be a teacher. I used to teach primary school and secondary school. And one of the things that really used to get me was the standard measurement techniques for children that gave no space for those that were creative, that gave no space for those that thought about things in a different way. And I was good enough academically, which quite often, as a female diagnosed with ADHD later in life, when you look back at the grades, you did just enough, but you were winging it. I never revised for barely anything. I couldn't, because it would never be able to grab my attention. Now I could sit and make a beautiful looking timetable of revision with all the colours and the highlights and everything like that, and it would look amazing, and it would be planned perfectly. But I would never be able to execute it. I would never be able to do that revision. When I was at university, I did music at university, and one of my final assessments was I had to compose. I had to compose a piece of music. I chose a song with a vocal line because I was a singer, so that was what I was comfortable in. I created and composed the song in the 24 hours before the final assessment, and in my final performance I improvised the vocal line over the top. Yeah. And that is me, and that is so many ADHDers through life. If I have a deadline, bulk of the work is done in the 48 hours before that deadline. If there is no official deadline, it gets done at some point. So it's, it's something that goes with you. And again, that might be, like you say, our natural state. Why would you do things in advance when you can go and do other stuff, and then when you've got a deadline, you meet that deadline and you get it done just beforehand? There's no need to do it months in advance. I could never do projects that were over a long period of time, because I've got no motivation to get it done until I've got a definite deadline. And it's so interesting when you understand that and see that, to then be able to put some strategies in place to make it not quite as last minute as maybe it would have been, but it's still fairly last minute.
Yeah. And again, I can completely see myself in that, because I believe that, if you have like 2 months for something, and I evolve, I grow, I gain knowledge. So if I prepare something like a course or like a launch for something, in the meantime, so many things happen that I then want to include in the already prepared thing. And then I have to redo it again.
And then it's a waste of effort when you could just leave it to the last minute.
Yes.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's fascinating. When you start to look into it, so many women do recognize, the behaviors in themselves, but also the emotional side of things. Because I say that is the downside. I have to work really, really hard to emotionally regulate myself. I have to work really, really hard to not take things to heart, even if they're not designed for me, or if it's a throwaway comment. I will take it as criticism. I will go over and over and over it. I'll replay it again and again and again in my head, which is why I started down the route, and what I looked at for the Women Thrive Summit and the talk that I did is around the power of self-validation and the strength that you have inside yourself, that if you can banish the comparison, if you can do away with the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and you can focus on reflecting, am I doing the right things for the right reasons? If I am, then that is enough to power me through. If I make a mistake or something is deemed as a failure, can I reflect on that? And could I have done anything differently? If I can't, then I have to let that go. If I could have done something differently, then I know that I can take that and I can move forward with that in the future, rather than sitting in a space of I should have done that. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I make a different decision? Because one thing that my dad has kind of almost instilled in me, especially as an adult, is we make decisions in good faith and we have to live with the consequences. And sometimes you're going to make a mistake, but as long as you acted in good faith in that moment, then that's all the world can expect from us. It's all that other people can expect from us. So for me and my coping mechanisms, learning that I can self-validate, Don't get me wrong. It's lovely being in a space where people tell you that you're great and you've got such value and, that side of things. But if you can be in a situation and you can see yourself, the positive impact that you're having on other people, and when you reflect on that, you know that you have always led with the right intentions. When you're in that place, it becomes so powerful, because when those naughty little voices and the demons do creep in, because they will always creep in, you can banish them a lot quicker. And I think that's because I'm so self-aware, because I do reflect. And part of that is the ADHD and going through so many years of worrying that I've upset people, worrying that I've said the wrong thing, worrying that I'm too much, worrying that I've, been just, inappropriate and just in a way that I've been too chatty, or I've said too much, or I've overshared too much, or I've dominated a conversation, or I've taken over a situation. Having so many years of feeling like that, and then being able to develop that tool that allows me to have that inner dialogue that turns that on its head and but that's past now. I can't do anything about it. In the moment, I behaved and I acted with the best intentions that I possibly could. I have to now let that go and look at my own achievements rather than comparing myself to others' achievements, because I am on my own journey and I am my own person, and my brain does work differently to other people. So comparing me to them is never going to go well for me. So I think really bringing all of these tools into my toolbox, and sometimes they deploy brilliantly, and other times, it takes every ounce of me to use my tools. And sometimes I just want to curl up in a heap on the floor, not talk to anyone, and just be in my giant penguin hoodie. And that's okay too.
Oh, that is so beautiful, because I think I don't think there's anybody who cannot relate to that.
Yeah.
This thing where you just want to crawl into a cave and just not see or talk to anybody.
Yes. Yeah.
And
that's self-preservation. That's how you recover to be able to do the next thing.
Yeah. So if anybody listening right now has never felt like this, please, give us a comment, write us because I'm really, really curious. I'm really, really interested to get to know people who have never been in that state.
I don't think I've ever met anyone that's never been to that state. There may be people who they're not ready to admit that they've been in that state for whatever reason, and that's fine. But I've not yet come across somebody. And the more I share my story, the more I share my vulnerabilities, which is what I've been learning to do more in the last year, especially towards, I'd say the second half of 2023 was definitely about me learning that it was okay if my mask slipped. It's okay to share that I don't have it all together. And when I do share that, I am amazed at the people that then come out and say, I'm so glad you said that, because that's how I feel. But I felt I couldn't tell anyone that that's how I feel. And again, that's a motivation for me to stay in the corporate world. When you're an entrepreneur, especially a multi-passionate entrepreneur, there's always a lot. When are you going to quit your day job? When are you going to leave the corporate world? And for a lot of people, that is their goal, that is their aim, and that is incredible. For me, there's still more work that I need to do. There's still more influence that I need to bring to that corporate world, to that organization, to show that as a woman, it is okay to sit in that feminine space. It is okay to feel. It is okay to be yourself and not try and emulate that masculine energy all the time. Because for so long, I sat in a masculine energy because I thought that that's what was expected of me. And it still is to some extent. But I'm on that path to show that that doesn't have to be the case. I've been described as a disruptor. And and there are times when I think, oh gosh, I don't want to be known as a disruptor. And there are other times when I sit proudly in that space and think, there's a reason. There's a reason why I'm a disruptor, because the corporate world does need to change. The representation of women in certain industries does need to change. And the acceptance for women to be women, we've still got a long way to go in those industries. So that's why, for me, and it's only recently that I've realized that that's my purpose. My purpose is change. I'm a change maker. Whatever situation I go into, I'm there to encourage change and positive change. Not change just for the sake of change, but change that has a fundamental reason that is going to impact even just one person in a positive way. And I guess then kind of bringing all of that around, it is okay to be vulnerable. It is okay to say, I don't want to talk to anyone. I, recently went on a social event. It was amazing and I loved it and I had a fantastic time. But the following day, I didn't reply to any text messages, emails. I didn't want to talk to anyone because my social battery had been depleted and I needed a day to recharge that. And I'm learning it's okay to say that. It's okay, as long as that's coming from a genuine place and it's not an excuse, it's okay to be vulnerable. And I think that's a really important lesson as a woman.
And I think this is the perfect statement to end our conversation.
Yeah.
Wow. Hannah, thank you so much. That was so enlightening and just I don't know about everyone listening right now, but it just blew my mind. It really blew my mind because I see so many parallels. I can relate to almost everything you said. And to see ADHD not as a disorder, but as a superpower. And maybe also as your natural state of being, like coming back to it, is I think such a relief, and also taking the anxiety out of it. Not being ostracized by society and being actually, authentic in yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
So thank you so much. That was so valuable.
No, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for tolerating my dog, who has also wanted to contribute quite heavily to the podcast, his opinions into the frame as well.
I will try my best in the afterwards to dim him down maybe a little bit.
Welcome to our chaos, everyone.
And that's it. That's it for today. That's our show. Thank you so much for staying with us and exploring the fascinating world of ADHD, where we didn't even plan to go today. So thank you. And if you want to connect to Hannah, you can find all of her links below this video or, in the podcast description. And if you want to learn more about what we do here at Moving River, find every information at www.superwoman.coach. I'm giving you a virtual high five right now because you are part of this amazing, super-powered community. And I love you being here, and I want to hear from you. And if you have 10 seconds, then please go and rate and review the show. It would mean the world to me. And it helps me bring on more incredible guests like Hannah. So until next time is going to be another amazing show. I promise you that. Keep shining, keep learning, keep growing, and keep flowing.